The next principle we've talked about before. I'm going to expound on it a little bit. The long term over the short term. The point is, every moment is an opportunity for life education. The cool part is, because this just isn't about the sport, we're using sport as a life education vehicle. I've already mentioned in my biased state, I'm willing to say this, and it is biased, but I also think it's legitimate, is there's very few life-educating vehicles better than sport. I don't know of any, frankly. There certainly might be out there. I don't want to be arrogant, but I do want to state that in sport, through the process of practice and games and the potential for dealing with success and failure and even humiliation and costly effort and preparation that may not turn into playing time at all, and you can't control the team, and you might be in a situation that's the odds are stacked against you all the time, and you may have overseers that are unkind or unlovely or uncaring. There's so many things that happen every day, every practice, every game that are a picture of the world and have transferability to eternity, and the whole thing within the context of the scriptures of Christianity and how we relate with God and how he relates to us and how we relate to others and how we treat our enemies, which are the connotation of the opponent and all that stuff. There are so many things. I once said to a coach, one thing that Frosty was a genius of, another thing, is he would stop practice because he wasn't bound by time. Now the bad news is he wasn't a time guy at all. But one of the benefits of, meaning when we had practice plans, there was never any definitive structure. It was kind of an ish thing, I-S-H, it was ish. We'll start about here and then we'll end about here. What he did have is a lot of flexibility. What he didn't have is a lot of structure. But the good news about the flexibility is then he had the flexibility to stop practice at any point and say, and ask us to do things that might have felt silly or corny, but he had a bigger thought. He had a bigger mission involved. So we might stop and slow down, and he'd bring out his station wagon, and we'd have a popsicle break. Well, that's pretty cool when you're in college football, and you're working super hard, and out of the blue he says, time out, take a seat on the grass, which you're never supposed to sit on the grass, lay on the grass. Everybody gets a popsicle. Let's take 5 or 10 minutes. He might have you just sit there and talk to each other. He might get you in small groups and pose a question that you bounce around. He was just thinking about relationships. He was thinking about fun. He was thinking about making memories. He was thinking about changing the pace. It was genius. It was genius. He'd stop and look at the mountain. We are at Tacoma's Mount Rainier is a gorgeous snow-capped peak that's incredibly visible from campus, from Tacoma, but from campus it was even closer that way. And he'd stop and say, let's look at that mountain. There'd be a great sunset. He was corny that way, but it was cool. It was different. It was weird, meaning different. And it was cool. It was something that broke. It's something that made you realize this is life now. This isn't just sport. He had this way. There was probably all kinds of things that he accidentally was doing, maybe on purpose, that were part of some of these uniquenesses. Taking time to go to the women's soccer team or the field hockey team or to the whatever sport was going on if we were out of practice, to run over there and cheer them on for 5 minutes during their game. I mean, why would you do that? Well, there's a lot of reasons. But it took away time from your practice to bless others. He was thinking about blessing them. And they did, I think, appreciated it. Certainly they should have realized he's taken time from his thing to at least acknowledge that you exist. That's a rare thing, cross sports and in athletic departments. And this was part of his vision. And he was thinking about educating about life. And I think about that. And when I consult programs, I say, listen, feel good about stopping practice at any point if there's what we call a coachable moment. Both a coachable moment that has to do with the practice or it has ramifications to the game, but also a life moment of a special effort or a special sacrifice or a principle of life. Because in our thinking, I already mentioned that the philosophy is thinking about the world. It's not talking about this team. It's not even talking about this sport. It's talking about developing men and women who are going to reach the world with their feet. They're going to go there, or with their mouth, they're going to pray about it. The world. He was trying to create, this coach, I didn't grow up in this culture. Frosty wasn't part of his vision that way, but it's part of a coach's vision that I respect, and I've embraced it, and it's part of our philosophy is that we're thinking about the world. Because God said, whatever you do it with the whole heart for me, for my sake, for the advancing of the kingdom, to make disciples and reach the lost and train, develop the saved. And so this was about the world, and this was about life education. It really is about, this is our mantra within the philosophy, this is about developing men and women so they can be great husbands and wives, fathers and mothers, friends and workers. This is what this is about. It isn't about this by accident. It's about this on purpose. It intentionally, that means we do it on purpose. It's strategically, that means we have a plan directed to develop kingdom-minded, Jesus-following, if they choose, men and women who will reach the world for Jesus. This is what this is about. It's not an apologetic goal. It's the target. To develop men and women, whether you're in a secular climate or a Christian climate. How do you do that in the secular world? Well, you do got to be wise as a serpent and gentle as a dove, depending on your overseers and what they've asked or demanded of you. But you certainly can pray your brains out, which is the first place to go. To pray the Word of God over your kids and over your program and all that they impact. I like the word impact versus influence. I'll use a moment to teach this here. A lot of times people talk about we want to be good influences. I'm not interested in being an influencer. I'm interested in being an impactor. And this is my teaching point. When I want to influence this bottle to fall off the edge of this podium, I kind of do this. I might tip it, right? I might do that so it rolls that way. That's called influence. That's some nuanced, subtle backdoor. I'm looking at impact. I want to impact the world for Jesus. I'm not interested in influencing it where people kind of can decide if they're in. I want them to say yes or no. I want them to say I'm in or I'm out. Really, it's biblical. He said, be hot or cold. Just do not be lukewarm. And influence to me is a word that has a feel of lukewarmness to it. That's just me. I'm just telling you what I'm thinking and feeling. You can adopt it, embrace it, or not. This is just ancillary teaching point in the midst of this. Here's another thing I've done with the terminology. I've changed from using the word train to develop. And my feeling and thought about that is train feels like I'm going to train you. I'm going to teach you. I'm going to train you. Is that going on? Yes. But the feeling it gave is kind of a top-down, I'm going to do this to you. Instead of develop, which has the feel of being with you and for you and building you up. To develop is to build. To train is something that feels different. So I've used the word whenever possible, develop instead of train. I threw out the word train. We're not going to training time, we're going to development. Because it just has a feel emotionally and mentally to me. It may not to you. I'm just giving you my personal take on that. And the reason that's coming up is because I'm talking about we're here to develop men and women. We're here to develop those that are in the inner circle and the outer circle. I can't lie. This is philosophically about impacting the world through sport. That includes coaches, players, managers, trainers, department personnel, families, friends, innocent bystanders, everybody that ends up rubbing with our sport experience in practice and in game, in season or off season. This is another target. This is a target. We are heading in that direction. We're heading the direction that we're going to use sport to develop men and women of God who are going to walk with God for a lifetime, finish strong, reproduce, multiply. This is our minimum target. Freakily high expectation, even within the Church of God in the United States of America. It's a freaky high expectation that they walk with God. That's not high. For a lifetime, that's kind of an understood. Finish strong, people don't even address that. Reproduce, it's not even on the table. Multiply isn't even in their terminology. It's our minimum target. This is our end point. If they're unsaved, to get them saved, born again. And if they're saved, to develop them and give them the tools to walk with God for a lifetime, finish strong, reproduce, and multiply. These are the targets. This is what we're using sports to do. Sport used to use us when we were self-absorbed. It chewed us up and spit us out at some point, depending on our coach and the circumstances and situations. We might have had a good experience, might have had bad, yada, yada, yada. But we're going to flip it, and we're going to use sport to advance the kingdom instead of sport using us in our self-absorbed, personal, altruistic desires, whatever they might be. And so when we talk about the long term over the short term, this is what I'd say to players. I say, all you care about is this season. You're thinking about you. I'm thinking about your wife, in this case I'm dealing with men, and your children and your children's children. I care about your future more than you care about your future. And that was the truth. Because I was trying to develop them in ways that their marriage has a greater chance of being enhanced, and their family, so that they actually are married with somebody they like, who likes them, and they stay together. This would be a target. And that their kids actually like their parents, and they like each other, and they want to stay in relation with each other after they're out of home, and they want to bring their grandkids over, and the parents want to see their grandkids. This is what we're trying to increase the chance of. These things, they may sound kind of simple and trite, but frankly, they're rare, are they not? If 50% of two confessing Jesus people are divorcing, which is a percentage no different than the world, if 50% are the odds on something working out at all, we're not talking about being great or good, we're saying working out at all, that's really bad odds for something that has so dramatic effect on individual people, let alone their kids who are caught in the wash. If the marriage does not stay intact, let alone be good, let alone be great. Does that make sense? These things matter to us. Here's another line we use. If we win championships and you can't keep a marriage and family together, that's a loss. I'm not excited when you come back and you tell me you divorced your wife or she divorced you or the kids are sideways and they don't follow us and I don't even know where they're at. We're not sitting there talking happily about our national championship or our league championship or whatever. It kind of tempers the time, does it not? When you come back with your players, if they had great success either personally or corporately, and the things that mattered most, which is eternity, or familial structure, positiveness, if that's not happened, I am not interested in a trophy or a ring. In fact, I don't care about them at all. Do I care about them? Yes. No. Do you understand the doctrine of both there? Yes, I care, and no, I don't care at all compared to this. When people ask us how our season went, what they're really saying is what your record is. What they need to be asked is, how's our season? This is a line. I didn't make it up. I just use it. We'll find out in 10 or 20 years. We'll find out our season went in 10 or 20 years when we see the fruit of the men and women we developed during that season. Because frankly, if we went 0-10 and we raised up God-following, God-seasoned, God-honoring men and women in marriages and families that are intact and functioning and flourishing, that was a win. That was a win. The wins in the record mean nothing compared to the life wins. And the life wins mean nothing compared to eternal wins. If people have great marriages without Jesus, whatever that looks like, and their families stay intact, and they go to hell, that's not a win. I'm disinterested in my record compared to the legacy of family lines. Completely disinterested compared to. Am I interested in it? Yes, I work my brains out, and so do you, Mr. and Mrs. Coach, Mr. and Mrs. Parent. We work our brains out to give people under us that we're serving an opportunity. But compared to eternity, I don't care at all. Does that make sense? This is about right priorities. I've got national championship rings. As a coach and as a player, I've been part of some super cool experiences important, both personally as a player and corporately as a coach or in organizations. They don't buy you a cup of coffee, number one. Number two, when your marriage and family's falling apart, Unless you're a fool, you don't break out your autographed balls or your rings or your trophies and say, I feel better now. I know my marriage is just in the toilet, or we're not even together anymore because I hate her, or she hates me, or both, and the kids don't even know where they're at. But dag nabbit, when we were 17 and won that stinking Babe Ruth League, that was unbelievable. That would be a fool. That's how foolish it is. I'm playing things out in exaggerated state to show the idiocy of short thinking, of limited thinking, of non-eternal thinking. I'm trying to drive us to the scriptures to get a sense of what biblical priorities look like. That's why the long term over the short term is literally taken seriously and is a big deal.